The matter of dress and grooming is a deeply personal matter. It's something that elicits all sorts of emotions. But let me just ask at this point, what are you thinking about? Maybe you're thinking, why does he have this hat on his head? Some are thinking, this must be a very defining moment in Brother Jackson's lifetime. Others are thinking, is this a new precedent? We've never done that before. Well, let me take it off. That was an object lesson to point out how distracting our dress and grooming can be. Yes, it can distract from the message that we bear. Instead of thinking about what someone is conveying in the message, if our dress and grooming is just out of the ordinary, something that is shocking, then it certainly can take away from the glory to Jehovah and also the message that we bear. But when we go around the world, we see a large variety of dress and grooming used by our brothers and sisters. Without showing you photos, you remember many of the Watchtower photographs where our brothers are witnessing. Some don't have a tie, others don't have a jacket. In Fiji, of course, men wear what might be referred to as a kilt or a sulu. So there's a large variety of dresses and costumes and outfits that are acceptable. And we probably noticed too, some of the governing body members, when they've released Bibles or been at conventions, have donned some of the local attire. So it's not as if Jehovah's organization is so strict and inflexible that we all have to dress exactly the same way. It's true, there are various circumstances that God's people face. In some countries, there's such a variety of items that we can use for dress and grooming. In other countries, there really isn't so many things that our brothers can use. I know my wife and I were very touched a number of years ago when we attended a regional convention. And as I was waiting to give the last talk, sitting behind the platform, I noticed the brothers and sisters who were in the Watchtower were giving comments. And it really touched my heart when I saw sisters come off the platform and then give their shoes and their jewelry to other sisters who were about to go on the same platform. You see, they didn't have much. They shared what they had. They didn't have a lot of choice, but sometimes we know some of you dear sisters particularly may go into a department store and it may look like you have a huge variety of things that you can choose from. But when you start looking, sometimes you may feel like those sisters at that particular convention, that there really isn't a lot that you can use as a Christian. So what can help us? Well, the encouraging thing is wherever you go in the world, whether brothers have ties or jackets or whatever they have, there's one thing in common. Jehovah's people try to be neat, clean, and presentable. And from the governing body's viewpoint, of course, you know, we're not trying to make all sorts of rules, rigid rules with regard to this. So what can help us to help our brothers and sisters have the right viewpoint, the viewpoint that brings glory to Jehovah? Well, I thought we might think of 5 scriptural principles. Now, there are many other scriptural principles we could look at, but these are 5 principles that perhaps could help us. So first of all, let's take our Bibles and turn to 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 9. And we're going to have this on the screen with the highlighted portions. Likewise, the women should adorn themselves in appropriate, and then notice the footnote says, respectable dress, with modesty and soundness of mind. And again, look at the footnote, good judgment, sensibleness. Not with styles of hair braiding and gold or pearls or very expensive clothing. So what principle do we get here, no matter where we live in the world? Well, certainly we wouldn't want any clothing that's showy or bizarre or provocative or that's revealing or too extreme with regard to fads. Again, the principle of the hat. If we're doing something or wearing something that really is so different from what is expected, what happens? Well, perhaps at the very least, it distracts from the message. But it could be a lot worse than that, couldn't it? It could give the wrong impression with regard to our morals and so forth. Now, a second scripture we could look at is in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 3. In no way are we giving any cause for stumbling, so that no fault may be found with our ministry. Notice the comment here, no way or any cause. So whatever selections we make with regard to dress and grooming, we certainly would want to make sure that in no way at all could this cause some stumbling on the part of those not only outside the congregation when we're presenting the message, but also within the congregation. If we were to wear something that would be provocative, perhaps that could arouse in some wrong desires. So having that in mind, it gives us a good principle with regard to selection of dress and grooming. Now, a third principle is found in the book of Numbers 15, verse 39. And we might say this is in the context of the Israelite nation, where Jehovah did give them some strict laws with regard to dress and grooming, laws that made sure that the Israelites would be different from the nations around them. So let's read Numbers 15:39. You must have this fringed edge so that you will see it and remember all the commandments of Jehovah and observe them. Now notice this point. You must not follow your own hearts and eyes, which are leading you to spiritual prostitution. Now that's a very interesting principle, isn't it? We're not for 1 minute suggesting we have to have these fringed edges on our garments today. But what's the thought? Jehovah was telling them, when you're selecting what you wear, just don't follow your hearts and eyes. In other words, we shouldn't feel, well, oh, I really like this. This is just nice. It suits me. It reflects the colors of my skin or whatever other feelings we may have. But rather, there are a lot more factors to take into consideration. No doubt there were some back in Israelite times that didn't like a fringe on the edge of their garments. But having in mind what Jehovah wants helped them to see what they needed to do. So that principle is a good principle for us today, to ask such questions as, will this raise eyebrows? Will it lower the standards that I have? Does it fit? Is it the appropriate dress for my age? Those are important questions that all of us need to think of. Well, a fourth principle is found in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verses 23 and 24. And again, it's one of the principles perhaps we would have thought of when we're thinking about this subject. All things are lawful, but not all things are advantageous. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let each one keep seeking not his own advantage, but that of the other person. So again, what type of questions would we need to ask? Well perhaps this selection we've made is not so bad that we're going to have someone come and talk to us about it, but is it upbuilding? Does it represent Jehovah in a fine manner? And we could say not only at times of worship when we're in the Kingdom Hall or when we're witnessing, but also when we're relaxing. Would someone be shocked to find out that we're one of Jehovah's Witnesses when we're on vacation because of the way that we're dressed? Well, those are interesting questions, aren't they? And the final scripture that perhaps gives us a little direction is in Philippians chapter 3 and verse 17. Here Paul says, unitedly become imitators of me, brothers, and keep your eye on those who are walking in a way that is in harmony with the example we set for you. Now, what's the thought behind that principle? Well, if we have questions in our mind with regard to dress and grooming, it's good for us to look at those who are mature in the congregation. Yes, what do they wear? What standards have been set within the congregation as a whole? And that will give us some idea as to what type of clothing we should wear. So brothers and sisters, particularly the Bethel family, we commend you for the dress and grooming that you display. We know that it does bring honor to Jehovah, but let's always keep in mind these basic principles. Yes, without making a whole lot of rigid laws, let's always do things to Jehovah's glory.